Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel. A big reason for the gap between rich and poor that people don't like to talk about. Later on, we'll be addressing surviving your divorce. Stay tuned. Here are the issues we'll be presenting today to our Viewpoints panelists for commentary. A startling new book called Marriage and Caste in America highlights a gap no one likes to address between the rich and the poor created by divorce. A new law about to be implemented in Quebec could set the stage for a two-tier medical system in Canada. And can we strike a balance in our approach to the green debate? Later on, we'll be talking about surviving your divorce. I'll be interviewing a lawyer on that. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints panelists. Paul McKeever is leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, and Balkrishna Naipaul is an author. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Christine.
The first article we're discussing here, now it's entitled, The Ozzie and Harriet Gap. Take a look at the headline. What this says in a nutshell, it addresses the gap between rich and poor and says that it's actually created by divorce. Now, the article refers to a book that was put out called Marriage and Caste in America. It was written by Kay Heimowitz. So the article highlights some of the facts written in that book, as well as, of course, the commentary by Margaret Wendt from the Globe and Mail. Interesting information she puts out here, and some of it can be, I don't want to say offensive, but a little politically incorrect how she states it. Now, we're going to be piecing this apart as we go, and I'm going to start with you first, Paul.
Sure.
What was your analysis of this article?
Well, you know, I don't think, apart from, like, as you say, some of the stuff got a little racy, but the general message, I think, was one that wouldn't surprise too many people, I think, who have known people who have been in either families that have broken up or families that were never together in the first place. And, but I think there's an unspoken root problem here. What isn't addressed, at least in the article by Ms. Wendt, is why did these people choose either not to get together or to separate in the first place? And so I think that's really left unaddressed. It's not simply a matter of money and education. There's something deeper there, and I think it's a moral issue. Really, I think you know, this is what we're looking at as a result of a consistent approach to harmony in society, which says there are no rights, there are no wrongs, everything's acceptable, do not judge. Well, you know, when you don't condemn what's wrong, you actually fail to praise what's good. And when you don't fail, you know, when you don't praise what's good, you end up with a society that doesn't value good.
Something Margaret says that's very interesting here. She says, and I'm quoting her here in this article, the more educated a woman is, the more likely she is to marry, stay married, and raise her children together with her husband. She goes on to highlight a CBC presentation that was done, a radio presentation that was done featuring the Jamaican Canadian community in Toronto. Metro Morning is the name of the program, and it talks about the problem plaguing this particular group where the fathers are absent. Now, this is one group we're talking about here, but it's worthwhile to remember in this article that she also contrasts that to another article that she saw in the Toronto Star that talks about the poverty issue, and it tended to be a bit stereotypical, as they highlighted a white woman with a nose ring that was never married before. But in her report here, in her commentary, she's basically suggesting that all of the issues surrounding poverty are not addressed. And I want to know what you think about that, Balkrishna. Do you think she was fair in this analysis that she gives?
No, I don't think it was very fair, because I saw some of the points that's raised here in terms of there's so many varying issues, really, that to just pick up one or two and say that this is what is going to make a marriage work, or this is going to get rid of poverty, I think it's really minimizing the whole problem of poverty on the one hand and marriage on the other hand. I mean, if we take the Indian model in terms of, you know, most Indians get married by virtue of arranged marriages. And there's many people who have looked into that. They have seen that it is a model that really works. And not only do people stay married, but it's true that people get ahead, and there's accumulation of wealth and education and everything that really goes with it.
Which goes along with this article.
But on the other hand, to really pick up two ethnic groups here, the Jamaican community and then the Inuit on the other hand, I think it was unfortunate that these are only two examples we have in Canada. But I think if you look at others and other variables, I think we'll find a totally different picture. And from that point of view, I think the article is shallow, if I may say so. It addresses a very important issue. We have to talk about poverty, and we have to really get at the question is, well, why do marriages break up? Why they break up in marriages, and what are some of the things we could actually look at in terms of really helping to bring this back in a wholesome state. But I don't think the article really deals with the selection, and in terms of just dealing with the Aussie, Harriet model, that in itself too, well, she talks about 3% of marriages that makes up this gay, party. In itself that too is very selective, and she hasn't said anything about that in terms of well, is it working? Is it working better than heterosexual marriages? I mean, those things we really haven't seen anything about that.
Well, the article was intended to establish a correlation between marital breakdown and poverty. And I think for that we can give Margaret some credit here, because I don't think this has been analyzed enough. Now, this Toronto Star, they actually launched, quote, its annual war on poverty, she calls it. I saw two criticisms of this, and she criticized it from the point of view it did not really get to the roots of what causes poverty in her estimation. But I also saw another critique of it, in that the suggestion was there were erroneous numbers and stats being thrown out when it comes to this poverty line. Nobody seems to really know for sure what that is, yet you find many people saying, well, X amount of dollars per year is what actually makes up the poverty line, so that you see, well, again, with that criticism, there tends to be a bit of an agenda behind the whole poverty issue without really dealing with what the issue is. And she's saying the absence of fathers, the family breakup. I mean, even from a logistical point of view, you've got two households now being paid for, whereas it would have been one before. Yeah,
obviously much more expensive to carry on two households than to carry on one. And that's why, of course, a lot of support arrangements don't get honored. And then we turn to enforcement, taking away a person's license, which then means they don't have a job or a way to get to their job, which means we create a whole cycle of non-payment and non-responsibility, or non-responsiveness at least, to the needs of the child and or the other party. So, I don't think that, it was a newspaper article. So, of course, she doesn't have that much space to get into the root causes, but I think the root causes, we're looking at the sizzle, not the steak, when we talk about, these are the effects, not the causes. The money, the poverty is the result of a lack of education, and perhaps more educated people do get together and stay together, but I think there's another reason, another part to the puzzle that's not being addressed here. And I think that's just a fundamental acceptance that there are rights and wrongs in society, and some people believe there aren't, and those are the ones who are suffering.
I'm curious what you would think of this particular statement, whether you thought it was derogatory on behalf of the writer or whether you thought it was just being honest. Educated women don't disapprove of single motherhood, but they just don't go into it for themselves. What did you think of that comment?
Sorry, so they don't disapprove?
They don't disapprove of single motherhood. They're not going to point fingers and say, well, you're single, you're this, you're that, but they don't do it themselves. They seem to know the route they want to take for themselves and their children and progression, as you were suggesting in the Indian community, but nope. Well, they want to take it themselves.
There we go again, though. That's the non-judgmental status quo. We don't want to say that any one sort of arrangement is any better or worse than any other. And that's where we will end up saying that things that are not working as well we'll pretend that they are working as well when they're not. And I think in any society where you want the good to prevail, you have to be prepared to say what's wrong and to say that it's wrong, and not just to pretend that everything's peachy keen no matter how bad it gets.
She doesn't think minimum wage, raising minimum wage is the answer. What do you think?
no, it's economically extremely unwise.
We're going to go for a break on that. And when we come back, we'll be talking about, well, the possibility of a two-tier healthcare system in Canada. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. The next issue up for discussion, well, a law is about to be implemented in Quebec. Now you're seeing that article there, clinics to get public money and charge fees. That's it in a nutshell. This new law to be implemented is allowing private health clinics to charge taxpayers, but at the same time it's also allowing user fees to be charged for necessary procedures. Once again, causing a situation where a two-tier system is being developed here under our noses. I mean, this has been up in the air for a very long time. It's being discussed, but faced with a similar problem across Canada, wait times. And this is what basically brought in this whole Bill 33 that you said you looked at. But you know what? It's your turn to answer first this time, Balkrishna. What do you think of this concept that, again, has been so controversial?
You know, philosophically, I'm against it. But reality, we have to actually look at what's really happening in the system.
No kidding.
I mean, I just came through a couple of months ago, a brother of mine had a major heart attack. And watching what was happening in the hospitals from close quarters, it really make you wonder, well, if I had the opportunity to actually, or if I had the means by which I could get the services that my brother needed,
yes,
would I not do the same thing? And it really, I mean, if the services are fine and the system is working, yes, this is the ideal, and I would say universal health care for all should be that. But in terms of practicality, I think, I mean, I have a good pension, and I have sufficient insurance that would allow me to do this, to make use of this kind of facilities. So why should I not be allowed to actually do that without people looking down from behind my back and saying, well, you know, I'm ripping off the damn system. But yet at the same time, I think we have to get a nice balance between both. It's a reality, it's happening elsewhere. I mean, sure, you know.
What I found very interesting is of what you're saying is that Tony Clement, a spokesman for him, actually recognized this, because the article says, interestingly enough, that the Conservatives are committed to the Canada Health Act, but at the same time, the situation in Quebec, it wasn't commented on, because there seems to be a recognition that we are facing a problem. So what do we do from here? Paul?
Well, I think nobody's wanting to deal with the problem, except the Supreme Court of Canada.
Sweeping it under the carpet.
Yeah, the Supreme Court of Canada identified it properly, and that is that when you have a single-payer system, and that payer is the government, politically charged organ, that collects premiums through the taxation system, there is no competition. And there's a disconnect. The patient wants good health care. The government wants political peace. And since the government's the one paying the bill, whether it's to a private clinic or a public clinic, it doesn't make any difference. As soon as the government's paying, it's government anyway. And so when the government is holding the gold, they call the shots. And they are not putting patient satisfaction first. They are putting political peace first, unions, re-elections, and et cetera. It is critical that, to my mind, for everybody in every income bracket, that we stop collecting premiums through taxation and instead set up a competitive system where if you want to buy into that OHIP system and it'd be open to everybody regardless of their health, then they could buy that health care, but they wouldn't have to. And they could buy private insurance, or they could just stick their money in their pocket and wait till they break their leg and open up a bank account, piggy bank, and pay for the broken leg. That way, there's a connect. The person who is paying gets to say, is this the service I want, or are you not going to give it to me fast enough and well enough? And if you won't, I'm not paying you. That's what we've been denied since 1968, when the Progressive Conservatives brought in the government healthcare monopoly. We haven't been able, as patients, to choose to say no to bad service. And now the only people who can say no are the politicians, and the only time they say no is when, you know, it's making them look bad politically. And that's not a health criterion, that's a political criterion. Has to go.
So in principle, what's going on in Quebec?
Well, in Quebec, what's going on is that the Quebec government is responding to a decision. They're trying to protect themselves from future constitutional challenges, and so they've done it by making sure that if you've got a problem where you didn't get your hip done quickly enough, your only complaint in the court will be that particular service was not done quickly enough, and the response will be quickly from government to put that into the private sector, and the rest of the system will remain in government taxation hands. So it's a way of basically stifling any dissent from those who are paying taxes. You know, people who have a little extra cash can buy their way to the front of the line within the public system, and it is within the public system because it's all paid for with tax revenues. So it's a deceptive practice, and it's one designed to ensure the continuance, actually, of a government monopoly on health insurance. It's a disservice to all of Quebec, and if the rest of Canada follows suit, it not only will be in violation of the Canada Health Act, but it will be in violation of our, I think, human dignity.
We certainly have a complex situation here, because one thing about Canada, it's always been applauded for its universal health care. And in a way, there's a double standard. If you look at pharmaceuticals, for example, I mean, you've got kids in Canada that are suffering with asthma and they cannot get the proper care. I mean, you look at the price of these inhalers. This is a reality that we're experiencing here. Yes, we go on about universal health care, but medication is also part of that. And let's face it, we really don't have it from that point of view in Canada anyway.
Yeah, precisely, yeah. You know what I like to see here? Just like the Canada pension plan, I would like to see there's a plan for health.
Yes.
And where we actually pay for it at a very early age. So when we need it, it's there. And we in that way, we're still dealing with the universal health care. Those who don't have the means, it's actually provided for. But those who can afford it, they also get what is necessary.
Well, some have also argued in support of what you're saying, that if you were to offer that kind of a universal health care combined a little bit for people that could pay some user fees, that you're actually freeing up the system so that those who can't afford it will actually benefit from that point of view, because those who could ended up going through a little bit of a separate stream. I mean, yes, it creates a two-tier system in a way, but one I've heard that others can benefit on as well. Do you agree with this?
Well, you know, in countries that have a public and a private sector for healthcare, they usually have a dividing wall between the insurance systems. And if you choose to go and pay for the price-controlled state-run system, that's how they control prices. Is literally by the government saying, you are not going to be paid any more than this, Mr. Doctor or Madam Doctor, such and such. Whereas they let the free market reign in the private sector. But you have to choose your stream early on, so that you don't, you know, ride somebody's coattails until you're 55 and then suddenly say, okay, I want the cheap insurance in the public system.
That's right.
So I think that's fair. There might be some criterion where you have to invest early on so that you're not trying to profit off of somebody's early investment in that particular system.
Well, it'll have to be managed, because the last thing we'd ever want to see here in Canada is to see our system evolve into that of what we see in the United States.
Yeah, the problem with the United States, though, is not that there are private sector insurers. The problem is that in each state, the government mandates that insurance include this and that and the other, and every professional body wants their service. It's become a whole system based on profitability. Oh,
that would be a travesty to see that here.
That's right, and each profession wants its service to be included by law, forced into the healthcare plan. Really, that doesn't serve most people who really only need coverage for that catastrophe when it happens. They don't need a $200 worth of you know, ear infection to be covered with insurance. They need the $70,000 heart transplant or $150,000. That's when they need the insurance. And by mandating that you have to pay for everything, including a hangnail, you can't afford anymore to buy well, many things in life, but in particular, you end up not having the coverage you need for those more serious events.
And we're going to go for a break now. Well, we're going to be trying to reconcile the extremes in the Green debate. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. The third issue up for discussion. We're talking about the environment. Now, that's an issue that's not about to go away. In fact, it's heating up. And if you look at that title, Drop the Extreme in the Green Debate, this article was written by Preston Manning. What he's saying in a nutshell is that you've got a lot of political posturing and finger-pointing going on. On one hand, you have, well, the extreme right-wing policies are going to destroy the environment. And on the other hand, well, extreme left-wing policies are going to destroy the economy. He's basically saying there's got to be an in-between somewhere. He also blames the media for politically posturing, not looking at the long term, but focusing basically on the short term. Once again, though, speaking on behalf of the media, the consumers that buy into the media are also to be blamed for that, according to dear Preston Manning. Now, he has a point here, because he's basically trying to, in a sense, of course there's a bit of an agenda here, but he's trying to make peace from that point of view, trying to look at real solutions to the problem. Now, I'm going to start with you this time when it comes to this whole finger pointing. It's been going on. There are definite extremes, according to what Preston Manning is saying here. Would you not agree?
I agree, and I think he's nailed it. That is that the political agendas, warring political agendas, interfere with just the rational pursuit of the truth. And so what gets the headlines? Well, it's that the house is burning down, not that, better wiring would prevent a fire. And so, in this case, I think there's a combination of forces. There are those who are ill-advised, those who are pushing an agenda that's for a more agrarian society, and if this is the way to get it, then better, all the better. There are downright anti-capitalists who just don't like rich people benefiting from making lots of cars and having lots of money while the rest of us. So they would want to see those factories shut down, and that we should all live off the land and eat berries and hunt moose. So I think there's not any one set of groups, any one group. There is a radical left. There's a center. There's a mass public who are just the victims of all of this propaganda, and then there are the scientists who fall into two camps, each side trying to be heard. And I don't think that necessarily the ones who are preaching all of the knowledge get heard. We get to hear that carbon is the enemy, and that's all we get to hear. Carbon, of course, is connected with production. Production is, associated with wealth, and so you combine a little bit of unusually warm winter weather with a movie by a former vice president, and suddenly all heck breaks loose, and it's easy to sell just about any green agenda.
There's still a lot of debate, though, when it comes to the whole philosophy of global warming. Now, according to the science of it, they say the globe is getting warmer.
Yes.
As to the effects of the natural process of things, because we're also seeing earthquakes which have nothing to do with global warming. Tsunamis, these types of things have nothing to do with the phenomena, and that's proven. So we're seeing a natural phenomena, but we're also seeing the human component of it. And it really is a debate as to what's causing what. Because on one extreme, it's humans. Humans are causing all of it, so we need to do something there, and it's all in our hands. But on the other side, and I'm not even sure if there's another side from that point of view. I don't think anybody is washing their hands of it and saying it's not a problem to begin with. We all know we need to do something, but we have a lot of barking going back and forth on both sides. So I think he has a point here. What about you, Balkrishna? What do you say?
Quite frankly, I think it's a red herring. I think Mr. Manning has gone. Actually, he's picking up the agenda on behalf
of what side?
On the conservative side.
Okay.
and it's one of those fear tactics that is introduced in the debate to really keep people quiet. I mean, we don't have anything like a debate that went on in Germany between the fundies and the realos. I mean, we're much more sober, and the way we're approaching this is very quiet, but it's very, very intrusive in many ways, but at the same time, it is responsible. And I think this matter of extremes, whether we're talking about dark green or light green, I mean, it doesn't exist. I mean, with the Green Party, their approach to I mean, it's quite sober when you compare to what's happening in Japan, what's happening in Germany, on the continent, and I think Mr. Manning really should take a lesson from his predecessors. I mean, especially when we talk about Mr. Aberhart, when he went up there with a chalk and blackboard and explained to people, this is what is happening in the environment, and maybe if we approach things a little bit more realistically and inject a bit of education in.
But isn't that in essence what he's saying? Because although traditionally he has the record of being generally more on the conservative side, he was actually critiquing both sides here, saying that the conservative side tends to finger point at the traditionally left side and say that they're taking it too far, whereas the other side does the same to the other side. So in a way, he is suggesting that we need to look at it from a realistic point of view and stop going to the extreme on either side of the issue.
Yes, but you know, I think the very fact that he's brought the outline, the agenda which he brought, which he actually has introduced here, is one of is really to kill debate rather than taking that responsible approach that he's actually advocating.
So you think he has an underlying agenda to kill the debate?
I think so.
What do you think, Paul?
I didn't get that impression from the article. Now, I can't say I'm an ardent follower of Preston Manning one way or another, but I would say that, I mean, there are a few things that I think at least the policymakers have to pay attention to. One, the drive, all of the fever about this issue can drive people to say, look, we don't know that it won't lead to a catastrophe, and we can't afford to take that chance. So just in case there's a catastrophe waiting, we have to do something. That is foolish policy making. That's not a basis for policy making. The only time at which a policy should be made is when there's evidence that a problem exists, and there's evidence that the solution you have in mind will work. There is no evidence right now that any of the plans we've been seeing proposed, especially Kyoto, will have any effect on A, the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, or B, global warming. The jury is not out yet on whether man's contribution to CO2 levels is actually causing global warming or whether this is just part of a natural long-term trend. And so I think it's a few things. The other thing we have to be careful about is not to turn back the clock on productivity. The reason we're able to do this science is because we have fancy computers that allow us to model, and this is because we have established such great wealth through productivity. And if we squash productivity, we'll actually be squashing...
It's a delicate balance.
Well, we'll be squashing our ability to go ahead and learn more about... I mean, cars create less pollution now than they ever have. And that's because of a profit motive, people wanting to spend less on fuel, bought cars that burned less fuel, and producers who wanted to make cars using less fuel have similarly taken production methods.
Speaking of those cars, though, people are not really, according to stats, willing to put their money where their mouth is. Everybody is up in arms over the environment, but people are not willing to put their money where their mouth is. Interesting thing what you said, though, I have to say, to close on with Preston Manning. He ended up becoming sort of victim of his own argument here, because now you're suspecting that maybe he has an agenda of trying to stifle the debate. When it comes to this entire debate about the environment, people are so suspicious of everybody else that it's becoming an issue, a major issue by itself. I mean, we've turned this thing into, to me, all kinds of proportions.
Oh yeah, and you know, David Suzuki said he's going to be starting a cross-country tour, and I was just wondering whether to buy the T-shirt or the coffee mug.
Both. Paul and Balkrishna, we're out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, I'll be talking to a lawyer about surviving your divorce. Stay tuned.